I'd just gotten home after a grueling day, already picturing myself sinking into the couch with an ice-cold drink when I froze mid-step. My backyard, my private sanctuary, was buzzing with laughter, the clink of wine glasses, and a group of impeccably dressed HOA women lounging around like they owned it. A long table, draped in a pristine white cloth, dominated my lawn, decked out with wine bottles, fancy snacks, and flickering candles. A portable speaker hummed smooth jazz, and my outdoor furniture had been rearranged to suit what looked like a full-on wine party. For a split second, I thought I'd lost it. Maybe I'd stumbled into someone else's yard. But no, that was my grass, my patio, my grill, all being used without a shred of permission. Confusion morphed into irritation as I scanned the scene. At the head of the table, swirling a glass of red wine like she was hosting a gala at some upscale venue, sat Linda. She was the self-appointed dictator of our HOA, infamous for her obsessive rule enforcement, steep fines, and unshakable belief that she ran everyone's lives. Linda wasn't just any HOA president. She was the type who'd measure your lawn with a ruler and slap you with a citation if your front door wasn't in her approved color scheme. Seeing her there, laughing and chatting like my backyard was her personal clubhouse, made my blood simmer. I took a deep breath, telling myself shouting would only make it worse, and marched forward for answers. Linda finally noticed me as I approached, barely glancing up from her glass before flashing a syrupy smile. "Oh, you're home," she said, her tone way too breezy for someone trespassing. "I hope you don't mind, but we decided to hold our little get-together here tonight. It's such a nice spot." She waved her hand around like she'd done me a favor by invading my space. I was too stunned to reply right away, my eyes darting to the other women, most of whom avoided looking at me, clearly sensing this wasn't okay. "Excuse me," I finally snapped, my voice sharp. "I don't recall agreeing to this." Linda let out a light, dismissive chuckle, like I'd cracked a bad joke. "Oh, you must have forgotten. We mentioned it at the last HOA meeting." That was a bald-faced lie. I'd skipped that meeting because, like any reasonable person, I avoided HOA drama whenever possible. Before I could call her out, my neighbor Mike, a fellow HOA skeptic and one of the few people I could count on, poked his head over the fence, smirking. "Yeah, about that," he said. "She sent an email this morning claiming you'd generously offered your yard for tonight." I whipped back to Linda, my patience wearing thin. "I never agreed to that." She waved a hand dismissively. "It's a community event, and since your yard's one of the biggest, we figured you'd be thrilled to host. It's for the neighborhood's benefit, after all." That's when it clicked. She hadn't asked because she knew I'd say no. She'd just assumed my property was hers to commandeer. I clenched my jaw, keeping my anger in check. "Linda, this is my private property. You can't just throw an event here without my okay." She sighed dramatically, like I was the unreasonable one. "We're almost done anyway. No need to make a fuss." She turned back to her wine, acting like the conversation was over. Meanwhile, her guests, emboldened by her nonchalance, kept chatting and sipping as if I were some minor annoyance. I glanced around. Someone had rearranged my furniture into a cozy circle. Another had set a side table by my grill, now topped with a platter of artisanal cheeses. Worst of all, one of them had fired up my barbecue and was grilling skewers like it was their own cookout. Mike whistled low. "They've really settled in, huh?" I exhaled sharply. Unbelievable. But Linda wasn't done pushing me. "Oh, by the way," she added, her voice dripping with fake cheer, "we'll probably do this every Friday. Isn't that lovely?" My fists tightened. Every Friday? She was claiming my yard as her permanent HOA party spot. The audacity was mind-boggling. I had to stop myself from laughing in disbelief. This woman genuinely thought she could dictate how I used my own land. I stepped closer, my voice steady but icy. "No, you won't be doing this every Friday. In fact, you won't be doing it again, period." Linda raised an eyebrow, like she hadn't heard me right. "Oh, don't be so selfish," she said, sipping her wine. "It's just a little gathering." My temper flared. This wasn't a misunderstanding, it was blatant disrespect. I tried reasoning, but she didn't care about boundaries. She'd decided my yard was her social hub, and that was that. Mike leaned in, grinning wider. "You could always call the cops for trespassing." Linda scoffed. "Oh, please. The HOA can use common spaces for the community's benefit." My patience snapped. "This isn't a common space. It's my backyard, private property. And since you won't leave when asked, you're trespassing. That got some attention. A few women exchanged nervous looks, realizing they'd crossed a line, but Linda didn't budge. She set her glass down and stood, glaring at me condescendingly. You're being ridiculous. We'll be done soon. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. You've got 10 minutes to pack up and go, or you'll regret it. She smirked, unfazed. And what exactly are you going to do? I just smiled. You'll see. I turned and headed inside, feeling her stare burning into my back. I'd given her a chance to leave quietly, but since she wanted to play queen of my yard, it was time to show her otherwise. Mike raised an eyebrow as I passed. You've got a plan, don't you? I didn't answer, but my smirk said enough. Linda had miscalculated, thinking I'd just take it. She was about to learn that messing with someone's property has consequences. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to my smart home app. My sprinklers were high-powered, automated, and covered every inch of the yard. I hovered over the button, watching through the window as Linda took another smug sip, oblivious to what was coming. With one last glance, I hit it. The audacity still floored me as I watched from inside. They weren't just hanging out. They'd turned my yard into their private paradise, acting like they belonged there. String lights cast a soft glow over their smug faces. The smell of sizzling meat drifted from my grill, and their laughter echoed like they had no worries. It was entitlement so thick it made my skin crawl. Linda, still sipping her wine, looked around with a pleased grin, like she was hosting some elite club. Every so often, she'd gesture grandly, gushing about the perfect ambience and how lucky they were to have this spot, my spot. She talked like she'd gifted them my yard out of her own generosity. I gritted my teeth, the last of my patience slipping. The other women were deep into their drinks, lounging in my chairs, some barefoot with their feet propped on my ottoman like it was a resort. One had set her glass on my patio table, no coaster, leaving a ring. Another had tossed her shawl over a chair, staking her claim. Then I noticed something that pushed me over the edge. My security cameras, discreetly placed around the yard, had been messed with. The one facing the patio was tilted down, clearly moved to avoid recording their little party. They'd planned this, knowing it was wrong. Linda sighed contentedly, tilting her head back like she was soaking in her own greatness. I was thinking, she mused aloud, we could do this every Friday. It's so convenient, way better than squeezing into one of our tiny patios. She laughed airily, like using her own home was beneath her. The others nodded, raising their glasses in agreement. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. No more arguing, no more wasted breath. I'd given them their chance. I glanced at my phone, thumb over the sprinkler button, and pressed it. A faint hiss sounded first, a subtle warning, then chaos erupted. High-powered streams shot out, soaking everything. Wine glasses flew, plates crashed, and shrieks pierced the air as the prim HOA ladies scrambled. Linda took a direct hit to the chest, drenching her silk blouse. She stumbled back, knocking over a chair, sputtering in fury. The others flailed, hair plastered to faces, fancy clothes ruined. One tried shielding herself with a napkin, useless against the spray. Another slipped grabbing her purse, nearly face-planting. The grill hissed as water doused the flames. The cheese platter turned to mush, and one woman fell into the mud, wailing over her designer outfit. Linda, soaked and livid, stormed toward me as I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face blank. "What the hell are you doing?" she screeched, wiping wet hair from her eyes. I raised an eyebrow. "Watering my lawn." Her nostrils flared. "You did that on purpose." I tilted my head, feigning innocence. "Did I? Or were you just unlucky enough to be in my yard when the sprinklers kicked on? They're on a timer, you know." Her expression was gold. She knew I was bluffing but couldn't prove it. The others, dripping and mortified, grabbed their stuff and bolted. "You'll regret this," Linda hissed, her voice low. "The HOA doesn't tolerate this." I gave her a slow smile. Neither do homeowners who hate trespassers. I turned and went inside, leaving them to their mess. The point was crystal clear: my yard, my rules. They'd learned the hard way. Linda stomped off, heels squishing in the mud, her crew trailing behind, muttering in shock. Mike, watching from his yard, laughed loud. "Best thing I've seen all year." I smirked. "It's only March." Her exit should have ended it. But Linda wasn't one to let humiliation slide. The next morning, a bright yellow HOA notice was taped to my door. Unauthorized sprinkler use during community event. $500 fine. I laughed, crumpling it up. $500 for watering my lawn. She'd invented a rule overnight to save face. I should have seen it coming. Linda thrived on control, and after that public embarrassment, she'd claw it back any way she could. She wasn't just petty. She was desperate to prove she still ruled. But if she thought I'd roll over for a fake fine, she was dead wrong. I called Mike, who was already chuckling. Let me guess, you got the fine? I blinked. You too. He snorted. Yep. Active participant in disrupting a community gathering. They're hoping we'll just pay and shut up. I gritted my teeth. Classic HOA power play. Make up nonsense. Bank on people being too scared to fight. Not me. I'm going to the HOA meeting, I said. Mike whistled. This'll be good. That night, I walked into the community center, calm on the outside, buzzing inside. I wasn't just there to argue. I was there to end this. Linda sat at the front table with the board, smirking like she'd already won. She thought I'd grovel. I took a front row seat, arms crossed, and waited. After 30 minutes of petty HOA drivel, landscaping updates, trash rules, she got to her point. We need to address a recent issue with property use and event disruptions, she said, eyes flicking to me with glee. During a scheduled community event, sprinklers were deliberately turned on, causing distress. I laughed softly. Distress. She ignored me. Fines have been issued for inappropriate water use during an HOA event. This won't be tolerated. She looked at me. If the responsible homeowner wants to explain, they may. I stood, letting the silence stretch, all eyes on me. Linda's smirk held, thinking she had me. I pulled out papers. First, this event was unauthorized, trespassing on private property. Second, per the HOA bylaws, I held up a sheet. There's no rule against sprinkler use. Third, my cameras were tampered with before the event, proof they knew it was wrong. I tapped the stack. So, let's talk real violations. Murmurs spread. Linda's smile slipped. This meeting isn't, she started, but I cut in. Oh, it is. If you're making up rules, follow the real ones. You've got no authority for these fines. A board member, an older woman with a stern face, spoke up. If there's no bylaw, we can't enforce it. Linda snapped. We need order. I smiled. The HOA serves the community, not harasses homeowners with fake rules. The room buzzed, board members nodding. Fines revoked, another said. We'll review other unclear violations. Linda's face reddened, but she'd lost. I sat satisfied. The war wasn't over, but I'd won this round. She tried to flex and failed. Mike clapped my back as we left. Think she'll quit? I shook my head. Not a chance. But I'm ready. Her defeat should have taught her something, but Linda doubled down. Next morning, another notice. Noise ordinance violation. Sprinklers causing emotional distress. I laughed. Emotional distress from water? She was targeting Mike too, citing unruly behavior for watching. She even spread word I was a dangerous influence. Petty moves piled up, trash bins tipped, snide newsletter jabs, glares from her loyalists. Then came a letter claiming the HOA could review my suitability as a resident. A scare tactic, pure nonsense. I laughed, more determined than ever. She wanted war? Fine. I dug into the bylaws, confirmed with a lawyer friend. Her threats were toothless. I wrote a letter dismantling her claims, citing rules, adding a legal warning, and sent copies to the board and neighbors. Reactions poured in. Laughter, thanks, some admitting they'd feared her too. Linda stormed over, waving my letter. You're undermining the HOA. I leaned in my doorway. No, I'm holding you accountable. She glared, speechless, then stomped off. Days later, Mike called, laughing. Emergency HOA meeting tonight, about you. She wants a vote to reprimand you. I grinned. Let her try. The packed room watched Linda rant about my disruptive behavior. She proposed a warning. Silence. Then the stern board woman said, I see no violations. This feels personal. Others agreed. We can't target someone like this. Linda's face paled, her plea for support ignored. No action taken. Mike grinned as we left. What's next? I smirked. Just starting. Linda's desperation peaked. After a quiet spell, She emailed the neighborhood about restoring unity, a veiled jab at me. Then, insanely, she planned another wine night in my yard. Mike showed me her invite, same place. I grinned. If she wanted a rematch, I'd make it unforgettable. That evening, I sipped a beer on my porch, watching her strut in with her crew, setting up like nothing had happened. I let them settle, then flipped the lights off. Darkness. A low growl blasted from hidden speakers. Primal, chilling. Whispers followed. Then sprinklers. Random, high-pressure chaos. Screams erupted as they flailed, Linda drenched again, floundering. She charged me, soaked. This is harassment. I waved her off. No, it's consequences. They fled, humiliated. Next day, her house went up for sale. She claimed it was a fresh start, but we knew she'd lost everything. The HOA reformed, new leaders scrapped her rules, and I got my yard back. Mike toasted me that night. What did we learn? I grinned. Mess with my yard, get the sprinklers. Victory sealed.